You got to remember that the largest credit card companies in the world, the largest retailers in the world, they get hacked. It happens. There's Amazon gets hacked all the time. Their servers do. And what matters is what you do when that happens. That it's a threat at all times.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Phoebe Scott, the Director of DevOps and Client Relations at Synctree. Phoebe, it's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about Synctree and what you do there.
So I run our DevOps group, which we started off as a dev shop, but then after client demand for a few years with, what do we do after we have a finished product, and we need someone to make sure it scales and grows and kind of take care of this baby that's been built for us. We started a DevOps division, and I run that team and then our client relationships for both sides of the business. So making sure our clients are getting what they want and happy, and that we're growing with them.
You were an attorney in Chicago before transitioning over into the tech side of things. Tell us about that whole progression in your career, and what aspects of your legal training you were able to sort of and still apply in your work today.
I loved law school. I loved the process of being very problem solving oriented, and I love rational thinking and logic, but the job wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be, I guess. And so I had an idea for an app that I wanted to see built. And as I was kind of becoming more disillusioned with my career, I thought, okay, well, rather than waiting for somebody else to build this, why don't I take my free time and see if I can do it? And I met some people who said, yeah, we'll help you bring this to life. And so I started working on the side, and eventually decided I wanted to leave my firm and do it full time and see if I could make it turn into a full-time job.
So tell us a little bit about that recommendation engine. It was Laudville, right?
Yeah.
The sort of the insight that led to its creation, sort of that opportunity in the marketplace that you sort of saw that this would sort of solve, and then the whole process of building this website and ultimately app.
When I was at my firm, I was doing a lot of doc review, which is very boring. You sit in a room on your own, and for me, I was clicking through FedEx receipts for, I don't even know, a couple months. So I got in the habit of watching TV shows while I was doing the doc review, which I guess anyone who used to work with me probably shouldn't know that, but that's okay. And I was on Netflix all the time, and when I would finish one thing I liked, I would want to, what's the next thing I should watch? And at the time, recommendations on the platforms that existed on Hulu or on Netflix were not great. So I thought, I know there's a couple people that if I call them, they'll immediately tell me something and it's going to be good. But why can't the computer do that for? Why can't something sort of ingest all the information from the people I know, what they're watching and liking, see how similar their taste is to mine, and then make recommendations in a more human-like way? And that's what I sought to do.
So if you were to redo it today, what might you do differently? Or
where I got myself into trouble was that we were connected to Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all these companies that are kind of have a lot of the same content and are kind of competing for your dollars. And I would send you to the cheapest place to get it, and then kind of tell you if you're about to buy something and you could get it for on a streaming service you're already paying for. And that was not a popular notion at the time. There were other companies that were doing similar things, and the ones that were acquired by one of the larger entertainment giants, and then the product was shut down because they don't want you to drive their traffic to somebody else. So I didn't really when I started it, I just wanted to solve a consumer problem, but I didn't realize that there's a lot of entities behind it that have their own interests, and you have to know what those are in order to grow properly and to not pose a problem. Yeah.
How do you work to build systems that in fact inject maybe a healthy dose of serendipity and things like that into the equation?
Well, so the way we did it was we would take into account all of your behavior. So if we were recommending a movie, it wouldn't just be based off of the movies you had watched. It would be based off of music you'd listened to, books you had read, and then your friends who you are connected to if there's a certain amount of overlap between what you like and what they like, and there's something that's very different from what you've consumed, this is something your friend might say, I know this is not what you normally do, but give it a shot, because I think given what you've been doing lately, you might like it.
You're a little bit of a unicorn in that you sort of blend this very technical side of things with something that's very human, right? Client relations. How do you bring both of those aspects to bear on both sides of the work that you do?
After I ended Laudville, I went back and learned how to code myself, because one of the things that I thought made me, where I was failing to manage my team effectively, was that I didn't really understand what they were doing and what went into the work they were doing. And so I went and I did one of those boot camps that took 3 months and built a couple small apps myself and had a much healthier and more holistic understanding of what the engineering team was doing and how they're making their decisions, what they were coming up against, how much time things would realistically take, and how to tell if things are on schedule. And it made it so that I knew from doing that I was never going to be a fantastic engineer myself, because I don't, it's kind of like the law thing. I don't like sitting in a room by myself with a computer. I'm a very naturally social person, and I enjoy, very empathetic. I like figuring out what makes people tick and who they are and how they think, and finding a way to relate to them. But I have the capacity to understand what the engineering team is doing, and I want to understand their work and what their struggles and their successes. And I ended up sort of stumbling into this place that I didn't even know there was so much need for between these two sides of these tech companies.
We talked a little bit about the progression, websites and sort of apps, and I was kind of curious, what's next as far as digital experiences go, and how are you beginning to think about that?
We can certainly do things much more efficiently than we were able to before. There's an element of the human connection and sort of that natural serendipity that gets lost, and so now I think we're trying to figure out how to merge the two. And so my guess is that it's going to be AI that feels more and more personal. Everything from the way that it sounds to the way that it gets to know you and communicates with you and understands you. So I think it's going to be us sort of figuring out, and that's on sort of the AI side, and then on the more logistics side with blockchain, I think we're going to figure out a way to more securely create a version of ourselves that is a digital version of ourselves, I guess.
Voice is kind of one of these areas where suddenly you can begin to serve up potentially different experiences based on the way somebody interacts with with one of these smart devices.
Yeah.
And sort of, what are your thoughts around how things might change in a voice world, both from maybe a branding perspective, and then also from a more human perspective?
I think we already see a fair amount of personalized advertising happening, so that a company doesn't just have, especially with digital experiences, everyone isn't seeing the same ads. And just like everyone doesn't get the same Google search results, and we'll see more and more personalization that speaks to you. There's so many different ways to sell one thing to different people based on who they are and what their experience is. It made me think, when you go through the airport, a lot of times when you go down the jet bridge to your airplane, they have the HSBC ads where they have the same picture and then they describe it in 2 very different ways, and they both apply. Mm-hmm. I think you'll see advertising that's live, that's like that to me, I might see an ad for a company in a way that really speaks to me and appeals to me, and you may see an ad for the very same product, same company, but in a different voice, in a different context, in a way that applies to you in your life.
What do you see as like the next big, kind of technical innovation that's coming down the pike that you think, you mentioned blockchain, but is it blockchain? Is it something else that's really going to kind of shake things up in our world? When
blockchain, people first started to talk about how exciting it was, and no one really knew, is this just exciting in a cryptocurrency context, or does it have other applications? If so, what? The one that was the clearest to me was it could track your medical history and make it conveniently accessible and translatable to another person or to an office, so that every time you go into a place, you say something as simple as, oh, here's my medical ID, and everything pre-populates. And we haven't been able to do that before because it was hard to do that in a way that was secure enough. But now with the ledger abilities and everything for blockchain, it's a very real possibility.
Right. It could also go a long way toward restoring some of the trust that's been lost in technology companies with all these data breaches and sort of privacy concerns and security issues and things like that.
Yeah, and that's I always, with clients, we have one of the biggest questions we have is how are you going to make sure our product is secure? And what are you going to do? And we tend to use AWS. We also use other cloud providers. We use a fair amount of GCP as well. But they're all Google and Amazon. They're on the forefront of security. And so when you're hosting something there, as you guys have with WP Engine, you know that this company is taking great lengths to make sure that everything is secure. And they've got the best engineering talent, they're putting all their dollars behind it. Even so, I'll say, if we have a client that comes to us and asks about it, you got to remember that the largest credit card companies in the world, the largest retailers in the world, they get hacked. It happens. There's Amazon gets hacked all the time. Their servers do. And what matters is what you do when that happens. It's that it's a threat at all times.
Have things like some of the privacy regulations that have popped up around the world, like GDPR and things like that, have they been actually more of an accelerant for business than maybe you thought it would be initially?
Yeah. Yes, GDPR was a huge accelerant for business. I think we all got the flood of emails in the weeks afterward from first of all, it was a reminder of every service you've ever signed up for, because all of a sudden they're all emailing you saying, hey, this is what we're doing to account for this new regulation, and we had to do the same thing. We had clients saying, hey, how are you going to make sure that we're good with this? And so every company had to put a lot of thought into it and work together and make sure that everything got upgraded together at the same time. Now they're doing the same thing with our ID cards. Everybody has to get a new license in the next year and a half, because it just becomes more and more important to be able to track authenticity and to make sure that the things are reliable. So yeah.
When clients come to you and let's say they're trying to target, let's say a specific demographic like Gen Z or something, do you think about the types of websites required for that audience differently than, let's say, the way you would have thought about building a website for even millennials?
When you think about the fact that the context that this generation grew up in, they didn't have to learn some of those very physical, real world skills and problem solving. Their attention span is much shorter. I mean, then a lot of this is problematic, but as a marketer, you think, okay, short attention span, need things to be very easy and very, and they're also used to everything looking very clean and well branded and very simple and exciting. So you have to kind of know to speak to them in a certain way and not expect them to have these like offline skills that were just part of life for every earlier generation. I think that's part of it, and the rest of it, I think we're still learning. That generation's growing up, and what will happen, we're all going to see it.
Yeah. One of the questions we love asking is a book that you'd like to recommend for our viewers.
Okay, I just started reading. Okay, so my whole family loves David Brooks, and everything he writes is I don't know, he's a brilliant writer. He's an op-ed writer for the New York Times, for people who don't know. And he just wrote a book called The Second Mountain that I'm in the middle of, so I'm recommending it as I'm reading it. But so far it's incredible. It's all about living a life of purpose and what that means. And once you get off the second mountain, which is kind of success as most of us define it in terms of financial success and work success and all the stuff we're talking about, things that are well branded and that give off a certain feeling of things being high end and great. But once you've gotten off that mountain, and often it happens when maybe you go through a challenging time in your life, you get on the second mountain, which is success defined by something good outside of yourself. And so he's got a variety of things that could be, but for people who have worked hard and gotten places in their careers and thought, well, but I want my life to have more meaning, it's the most incredible book, because this guy's done everything and accomplished everything, and he just started to kind of get on his second mountain in the last few years, which about the Gen Z, I think that's a big thing that will be, how do you communicate to that generation that's been raised to really think everything is so personalized and everything's about them? to care about a purpose bigger than themselves, whether it's environmental or political or, you name it. So that's, David Brooks is The Second Mountain. It's a fantastic book.
Awesome, Phoebe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Phoebe Scott, the Director of DevOps and Client Relations at Synctree.